All right, folks, let's see what's happening in the world today. I'm sure that some of our folks may be appearing later on and giving us their insights into world events and all along those lines. But let's definitely check into what's happening in the world, and let's also maybe put some light on this situation as well. So, definitely a lot is going on in the world, and definitely a lot of issues are happening in the world as well. So, we do know that the president is over there in Ireland. And of course, he is over there for a Good Friday's peace accord and the celebration of that as well. So, definitely, that's some of the things that are happening in the world. I know that I need to put some light on this situation. So, if y'all will hold on 1 second, we're going to put some light on the situation and all along those lines. So, there we go. That's much better. There's light on the situation, light in the world, and all in that kind of way. So, definitely some of the things that are taking place, of course, are definitely what is going on in the continued war in Russia and Ukraine. So, we definitely have things happening in that space. And of course, we've got a number of other things that are happening as well, including a recent attack on Myanmar and all in that way. So, we did have the recent attack on Myanmar that was taking place, and we've got other things that are happening in the world as well. So definitely a lot is happening in this world, and we're going to try to give you reports on them, let folks know how things are going. And of course, we've got a guest today as well. So definitely going to find out about a very important season that is going on, that being tax season, and all along those lines. As a matter of fact, I think the deadline, well, 15th falls on a Saturday, so you might have till Monday if you're one of those late folks and all in that kind of space. So we're going to see what folks have to say about this as we bring them on to talk about the tax season. And we might have some other folks coming on. And of course, we'll get to some other world events as well. But I did promise Miss Dr. Jackson that I'd bring her on. And of course, we're going to share some of the tax tips that she has and all in that way. So we've got Dr. Javon Jackson with us. So we're going to see how she's doing on this particular day. Probably keeping very busy and all in that kind of way, because we do know that it is definitely tax season, and it is definitely a very busy time of the year and all in that kind of space. So how are you doing, Dr. Jackson? I know you're coming at us from Maryland. And like I said, I did reach out to you after hearing about you through the wonders of the internet and everything. And I do know that a lot of folks are very much, thinking about their taxes, because the deadline is usually the 15th, but the 15th did fall on Saturday. So I'm thinking they probably got till the 17th if they're doing that last minute filing. But most folks that I know have done early filing and have got that out of the way. I talked to one gentleman that I think got it done almost a year ago or something in that space, but definitely got it done a long time ago, some time back. But definitely, I know you're keeping busy. So if you just maybe give us some idea of how things are going there in Maryland and some of your thoughts about tax advice and all in that space. And of course, Pod TV is a world network. So if you've got any advice that you want to share, not just to those in Maryland, but maybe you can even help those in North Carolina, where I'm based, and actually where the network presidents are based as well. And of course, there are folks that are watching from around the United States and around the world. So just share a little bit about yourself and maybe some of the thoughts that you might have as we are winding down in tax season, even though I don't know that some folks went for those extensions, and I don't know how long the extensions lasted this year. I know that during the pandemic, there were even greater chances to extend stuff because people were dealing with the pandemic. But apparently the president has said that that national emergency is over. So I guess we've got to get back to life is normal, including life in the tax season and all
Yep.
that way. So definitely share a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you've got going on in the tax world and just in the world of finance.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Mark, for having me. It is certainly an honor to be able to share on your platform and just to share some good information to help the listeners just get further ahead in their financial goals. And so, yes, as you stated, I am definitely one of the forerunners in the financial world. I have an investment advisory firm that's registered in the state of Maryland, where we do focus on retirement planning, investment planning, tax planning, and estate planning. Those are the areas that we like to play in. And I am not a CPA, right, or a tax person. However, I do focus, a lot of our planning strategies are based around tax free, tax favored strategies for those people who are in the retirement phase, the pre retirees, and those who are in retirement. So that's really where my value, where my genius shine at. But of course, being in the industry for 15 plus years, you learn about just taxes in general, right? And working with tax specialists on the team all the time to really help our clients to keep more of their money, basically, right? To keep it nice and simple, just to keep more of their money. And I know, as you mentioned, a lot of people are in one or two categories. Very few are like your friend you mentioned, who filed a whole year ago. I commend that brother. That's amazing. I don't even do that. But you know, most of us aren't rushing to file taxes, especially your audience of entrepreneurs and, senior executives and things like that. We're usually not rushing to file taxes. But for those but we know it's something that has to be done. And so we're all at that deadline coming up. And so most of us are either scrounging, right? Still trying to get it together, and you may even need some more time. And one thing that you touched on, Mark, was that how the pandemic gave way for a lot of reprieve, and
Right.
believe it or not, there's still a lot of reprieve out here as well, because of the recent we've experienced our country in different areas have experienced a lot of natural disasters.
Right.
If you remember, we've had a lot of storms and tornadoes. For those people who are in like Mississippi, they have been received a reprieve to extend filing their taxes through July 31st
Mhm.
because of their recent things, and that includes the contributions as well to their IRAs and HSAs as well. People in New York, if you remember, we had a lot of snowstorms there in New York at the end of December, I believe it was. So New Yorkers have been able to extend their filing through May 15th.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, those people in California, again, just a lot of natural disasters, parts of Alabama, Georgia, they've all been extended to October the 16th. So if you are in any of those areas and you're just like, I need more time, you're stressing out, take advantage of the reprieve that the IRS is giving you so that you don't have to feel like you're just like so racing the clock, right? And then, of course, everybody else there are who may not be in those areas, but you did experience different type of disasters or something. The IRS does have a tax relief in disasters that you can find right on irs.gov. If you live outside of those areas, and you can dial 866 562 5227 to see if you can request a extension under those same guidelines, because there may have been some other disasters and things like that that you were affected by as well.
No,
So
that
that
makes
would really help those people who are like, in those areas who are just feeling like, I need more time.
yeah. And do you have to, as from what you're understanding, do you have to go online and make those requests, or are they just like automatically out there for those folks that are in those areas? I'm imagining that even if you're in those areas, you still have to go ahead and make the formal request.
No, those people who live in those areas, it's automatic. Now, if you're not in those areas, then you do have to make a formal request.
Right. So you got to make
Yeah,
a formal request. But if you're in those
yeah,
areas and you've got that
yeah.
October extension or that May extension, they are automatic. So you don't have to rush to the post office on, I believe it's a Monday, since the 15th did fall on a weekend this year and everything. So
That's
they've
correct.
got till technically the 17th and all
That's
that
that's right.
stuff.
And
So,
that's correct. And then those who they may not have experienced any type of a disaster, you still have access to file an extension as well. You may have to pay for that, but you can do that as well. So we still have some ways. But now anything beyond with an extension, it does not extend your payment, right? What you owe, but it will extend so that you won't get the penalties for failing to file, which is can be extensive, like 5% or so a month
But
that you don't file, that the IRS will fine you with, and then that has interest attached to that. So definitely file, right, or file an extension so that you can avoid any penalties and stuff like that.
definitely. And you mentioned that part of what you do is also being involved in the investment space. So I just wondering when you got involved in that, and if you could tell us a little bit about your organization. I do know that you are part of an organization called Chief, I believe it is, and all in that space, which is kind of like a women-led organization in that kind of way. So if you can just share a little bit about those organizations that you're a part of and what they are doing in that investment space.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting you brought that up because I just literally this week received my certifications from the WeBank, the Women's Entrepreneur Business Council, that as well as women-owned small business through the SBA. And so, we're always looking to help women and families just really get further and take action in their financial goals and objectives, because what we found is that many people don't have a lot of hope in their financial future because of the lack of resources, the lack of information that's available. We're so busy trying to make a living that we really don't focus on the big picture. I always like to refer to, as consumers, we have what's called a micro lens, versus a micro meaning, we tend to focus on what's happening now. Like, as we were just talking about taxes, everybody's trying to feel like, how can I save money on taxes, and on the taxes that I owe. But the truth of the matter is, if you're trying to figure that out now, right, it's too late to figure that out now for 2022 taxes. However, with a macro view, and this same concept applies to investments as well. With a macro view, what you want to do is sit down with people like myself and tax planners who can show you what strategies and things like that you can implement this year, so that next year, come tax time next year, you won't have a potential tax liability, right? Or whatever that liability is, it can be lower because you've made some adjustments and you've implemented some strategies. And that same thing, as it relates to investments. A lot of time we're looking at, what can happen today, but we do a lot of planning. And just speaking of planning is nothing but bringing the future into your present so that you can do something about it now. And that's what planning is all about. What we do with investments and retirement planning is making sure that people can confidently say, no matter what the financial climate is going to be, that they'll have a good financial future. And that's what our firm really specializes in, working with those pre-retirees and retirees who are, concerned about market volatility. They're concerned about, they're writing big checks to the IRS now, and they're even concerned about doing the same thing in the future. And those who maybe just find themselves in this cycle of just draining and replenishing their savings to finance their lifestyle. So what we do as a result of our Be the Bank cash flow blueprint, we help retirees to safely grow their money safely. We show them how to drastically cut their taxes. And then we show them how to become their own bank so that they can save and generate more income in a time when they need it the most. So that's what we've been doing a lot with our clients. Our firm is licensed in the state of Maryland, but I'm dually licensed. So I'm also licensed in several other states, one being North Carolina on the insurance side. So I'm dually licensed between securities license as well as insurance license. And so we've been able to help people all up and down the East Coast corridor to just really put themselves in a better financial position so that they can really be able to live that stress-free, worry-free life in retirement.
That makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of concerns have been around here on the network, and actually, one of the founders is a pension attorney, that being Nick Palveda and everything. But I was knowing that there's been a lot of concerns about the loss of pensions, a loss of Medicare, and a loss of a number of other things to the elderly community. So, in talking to your clients, is that something that y'all have been addressing? Because there are some folks that saying that it may be gone by 2025 or 2030 or something along those lines, but definitely in the near future if things are not done to drastically change that. But I was just wondering if that's something that you've been dealing with your clients.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, last year we hosted about, I want to say, three premieres of a documentary that's so educational, called The Baby Boomer Dilemma documentary. It's an expose of America's retirement system. And we personally sponsored movie premiere showings of this documentary to educate the consumers on what things that they need to be focusing on. And they drill down on the pension funds and how a lot of the very few states and companies that offer pensions, how a lot of those funds are really underfunded. And most people, they think they found a lot of security. And years ago we found a lot of security in pensions and stuff like that, where the companies, the employers, took care of their employees. But those things changed back in the 1980s, where now they put a lot of that responsibility on the employees themselves to be able to, and I'm throwing up the quote signs, to be basically be their own investment advisors, to manage their own assets, which is truly a disservice. And because they've been given this responsibility that they are not qualified for, what happens is people, they get to retirement age and they don't take the necessary steps to sit down with income planners and retirement planners. They get there and they're exposed to the things that you're talking about now, to Social Security, letting people know that, hey, you may only get about 70% of what we promised you, just because things did not go as planned. All of these things that have transpired over the past couple of decades, between the wars, the pandemics, all of these, people living long. It's a lot of things that contribute to this issue, but it puts today's consumer, those who are preparing for retirement now, in a really bad place, if they haven't done the proper planning. And so we are really, really big on educating consumers on the things that they need to do, how they need to reallocate their assets so that they're less exposed to some of these erosions, taxes being a major one of them, market volatility, all of these things, that healthcare, all of these things that really erode people's income and their ability to live that same quality of life that they spent the last 20 and 30 years working so hard for. And it's really sad, but I'm grateful for platforms like this, where you guys are educating people on this. So, with companies like myself, and our goal is to really continue that education, to really help people position themselves, so that they aren't victims, of whatever's going on right in the world, the global economy and things of that nature.
No, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. If you can just tell folks a little bit about how you got into this space and everything, I'm sure folks would be interested in knowing that and how you got involved in the investment world. And then in a little bit, I'll be bringing in Sasha Starr, who is definitely coming at us from Canada, but has also got a show later on this afternoon called Modern Investment. And he's also very much a Ukrainian citizen, having been born in Odessa and all in that space. So he's definitely been following very closely what is going on with the war there, that being directly impactful to his own family and all in that way. But I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about your background. And then, like I said, I'll try to bring in Sasha as well.
Sure, my pleasure. Mark, I tell you, I'm really still blown away by just all that I've been able to accomplish, being a four-time published author, leaving corporate America 15 years ago with a six-figure income to pursue entrepreneurship, to now being one of the very few female Black owned and registered investment advisory firms, where we're managing millions of dollars. But what a lot of people don't know, Mark, is that there was a time for me where I had the rug pulled right from underneath of me, right? I found myself broke, busted. I was embarrassed, ashamed, alone, all of that, and pregnant after the 2008 real estate bust. I lost almost everything in that bus. Foreclosures became a reality for me. Divorce became a reality for me. Bankruptcy, all of the financial devastation that you can think of became my reality. And I was really trying to figure out, like, how did I get here? Like, what happened? I'm working 10, 12-hour days. I'm being diligent with my resources, being responsible, paying my tithes at church. How in the world did I get here? And I found myself reading a book during the Christmas holiday weekend, a book by a guy named Patrick Kelly called Tax Free Retirement. And what was interesting in that book was that the information that I was reading, I had actually been pre exposed to it 3 years prior. But what I found out was that I didn't have all of the information. And it wasn't, I was suffering not because of the information that I knew, but it was the information that I didn't know. That had I known it in those moments 3 years prior when I first learned of some of that information, my current situation could have been different. And so, of course, I had to start putting the pieces of my own life back together. I started educating myself. I started connecting with people who knew more about money than I knew because I definitely knew how to make money. I just didn't know how to grow I didn't know how to leverage and preserve money. And what I've learned is that, and many of you, what I've learned was that if you don't have a plan to grow and sustain your wealth, then you could quickly find yourself right back in a place that you never thought you would be. And this is why, at that point, I decided to become a messenger of good news. My company is called Good News Financial because I didn't want anybody else to have to go through all of that financial devastation that I had experienced. I'm really passionate and committed to making sure that people, restoring the hope and the confidence in people's financial future, and having those hard conversations, right? So that they can have an easy financial future. We're able to, dot the I's, cross the T's, fill those gaps, those blind spots. Because I was in that blind spot like many people are today, where they just don't even know what they don't know. And so I'm committed to helping them to, add and subtract, and so that we can get to the multiplication, right? So that they can retire, their dream lifestyle, and to have the joy that they all deserve. And that's actually how I ended up here, doing what I'm doing now, and really committed to helping as many people as I can, reach their destination and their dreams and goals.
That makes a lot of sense. What do you think the biggest mistake is that entrepreneurs make? And like I said, I'm going to bring Sasha in, and hopefully he'll be on camera and ready to talk about some of his thoughts, because I know he's got the Modern Investment Show coming up
Mhm.
soon as well. That comes up at 1 o'clock on Eastern Standard Time, and all along those lines. But what is the biggest mistake that you think folks make sometimes in the entrepreneurial world?
Oh well, I will say the biggest mistake is that they don't plan an exit strategy. Entrepreneurs, they spend years and years, trying to build and grow their business. Again, that micro perspective, what can I do now to build and grow and accumulate? But they don't realize that there's going to come a time that they can't continue to do that. You can't, that 60, 70-year-old person, cannot continue to grind the same way as that 20, 30, and 40-year-old people. And there's a time where you're going to need to have some type of plan to leave the business, to sell the business, to pass on the business. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't plan for that until it's too late. And so that's one I would say is one of the biggest, mistakes that entrepreneurs make.
How's it going, Sasha? Definitely, as you can tell, it was close to tax season, so I thought I'd bring a person that is in the investment and tax space here for the beginning of the show. And I know you've got modern investment later on today, and all in that way at 1 o'clock, as I've alluded to a couple of times. But I didn't know if you had any thoughts or any things that you wanted to share with the Dr. Jackson on this particular edition of the World Edition. And of course, we're going to get to some of the horrors that are going on in Ukraine as well. But definitely, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about what the conversation has been so far. If you've got any questions or thoughts for Dr. Jackson.
Yeah, I agree with you about this mistake that many entrepreneurs do. When I was younger and I was starting many ventures, I always was thinking, whom am I going to sell it? And that was a very motivating factor to tailor your invention the way so it could be sold to either a bigger company or an entrepreneur. Few of my ventures I took public at a very early stage, so the exit was already built in. And when I attracted investors, what I was telling them that we are going public very early. Uh, Maybe it's not going to be a great price of what we will be able to sell our shares, but there is a possibility. At least this way, you're creating your own currency, and you can, if you're successful, you can reap huge rewards later on. So that's what I was doing. Now, at this stage of my life, I'm involved in managing my personal finances, and I'm doing that through stock market investing. But it's not a straight investing when you are buying hold of shares or so on. I'm not doing that. I think this is an old style of investing. It's not applicable anymore. The markets are very fluid. They can make big moves either on the positive side, same as negative side. So I developed a show by the name Modern Investing, where I'm trying to explain. I don't think that I'm very successful at it because what I've learned through so many years of personal experience investing, and I have a great capacity to recognize patterns. I'm a master chess player as well, so I recognize patterns and I can move very decisively when I see that the patterns are in my. Also, I'm studying different stocks. I believe that it's not stock market; it's market of stocks. You have to know your stocks, not only fundamentally what they're doing or so on. You have to also always look at where they are in their trading cycle. Is there under accumulation? Is it a distribution phase? Is there earning report coming soon? So people will start uh, showing more interest. And in my last few predictions, I was very successful. One comes with NVIDIA, which is basically anybody can do. You don't need my insights. But lately it was Lululemon when they had very strong earnings and they shot up in a matter of 20 minutes uh, over 20%. Almost, it was very spectacular. And they're still sitting there. I'm waiting for them to come down just a little bit to close the gap between what they were trading before earnings and after earnings. But it's very difficult to wait for it because stock's still going higher. No, but not 20% today, but it's still in very solid territory. And when people are buying their products, people believe that, oh, okay, they have great earnings, but then they will come down. It cannot go on forever. They don't understand something. People who are buying their products, their friends are going to buy their products as well. And even friends of friends will buy their products. So the story does not end with earnings report. It just starts with earnings reports. And obviously, your risk is now um, quite reduced compared when you would buy before earnings. So I'm following this stock. I'm following few stocks, never more than 10. 5 would be ideal. And my portfolio now is it's about 6, 7 stocks. I don't have a diversified portfolio. I don't believe in diversification. And my first big money was made on one penny stock that I knew the owners, I knew what they were doing, and I followed. At one point, I've invested everything I had in that stock, and it paid off very handsomely. So if you really think to make good money in a stock market, diversification is not the way to do it. Although it protects you in bad times or so on. And on my show, I have dentist, Dr. Somberg, who developed his own investment theory, which consists of buying S&P 500 as the mirror of U.S. economy. And because U.S. economy was strongest in the last 200 years, you cannot go wrong with buying S&P 500. So if you divide your portfolio in cash 50% and S&P 500 50%, and then if S&P 500 will keep going higher, you start selling some of its units and you accumulate more cash. Now, if it's a different way, it's another way around, then you bring more cash into buying S&P 500. I don't like that approach because it's a classical averaging down, which loses in most cases. I'm a big proponent of averaging up. If you have a stock which is going higher, you keep buying because your average price still will be lower than where the stock is trading, but you accumulate larger position. And if you're right, you can reap great benefits. And apparently, most of the books, I read a lot of books about investments and stock market. Most of the books, the most successful traders ever, they were averaging up, not down. By the way, I can recommend this book, Market Wizards.
Hmm.
And you don't have to read all of it, but I recommend you read very carefully. I read it actually 4 or 5 times. William O'Neill. He is amazing investor. He's founder of Investors Business Daily, and he has 2 rules which I use always religiously. Rule number 1: if you have margin call, never bring more money. Sell. Later on, you will have that cash available when these things will turn around, market will start going higher, your stock, then you go and buy it, but don't bring more money. It will just it can eat very heavily into your resources. And number 2, if your stock going down 7%, sell it. Don't hold to it. Sell it 7%. You bought something at $100 a share. It went down to 93, so you lost 7%. You sold. No discussions, no second thoughts, nothing. If the stock will start to recovering, so it will go up to say 95, 96, you see that the worst is behind and stock started to recover. By the way, it's very seldom happening that you sold at 7% loss and right at that time stock started to recover. No, it will lose 10% and 15% and sometimes 25 and 30% before it will turn around, start recovering. So this is a way to protect your money. You keep your winners. In fact, you even add more to your winning positions. You build up tremendous positions and you cut your losses. Actually, when I buy stock, I know in first 15 minutes if I'm going to make money or I will lose money on that stock. That's enough time. You see the red, you have to do periodical cleaning up of your portfolio. When you see reds, get rid of it, sell it, and like erase it. You should not have reds in your portfolio. Greens, that's what you're driving, and build more and more your green positions. Get rid of your red positions. So these are not complicated rules. It's, in my opinion, anybody can do it, providing that you have interest in stock market and you enjoy doing that. If you don't, then just leave it to professionals.
Speaking of complicated rules and everything, one of the things I'm going to bring in Dan Weatherden, and definitely we got to get to some other world issues as well and everything. But one of the things I was curious about, Dr. Jackson and all, is it does seem that sometimes entrepreneurs in particular seem to get their entrepreneurship journey out of a need of necessity. Because I have seen you just mentioned that you were definitely going through some hard times when you decided to become an entrepreneur, and I've seen some others that have done that as well. And sometimes that can be a good strategy because you're trying to find that quick fix and everything in order to get your back on an even playing field. But I do know that sometimes that can also be a disaster because after you get that quick fix and you get that entrepreneurial boost and you get that money, then sometimes you don't always learn the lessons that cause you to go into the bottom uh, spiral as quickly. So I have seen some entrepreneurs that have definitely been successful in the sense of using entrepreneurship to get their money back online, but then because they didn't learn the lessons, they immediately lost the money. We've seen that definitely with some athletes and some entertainers as well. But I just wondering your thought around that, because it does seem like entrepreneurship can be very much based out of necessity, and sometimes it can come out of necessity like it was with you. But I don't know that all the times the entrepreneur learns the lessons of creating business plans and having a plan for the future. But I was just wondering your take on my assessment.
I totally agree with that, Mark. Now I don't think there's nothing quick about entrepreneurship to begin. First of all, okay, it takes a lot of grit and grind, right? We know the statistics about how most entrepreneurs and businesses fail in that first 5 years. So again, I mean, I know the last few years with the evolution of the digital space and the e-commerce and stuff like that, people have been able to see some success, right, in a shorter time period because of technology and things like that. But I totally agree. Again, like the lesson that I had to learn was if you don't have that plan to grow and sustain your wealth, then you could easily find yourself right back. And especially as an entrepreneur, while entrepreneurs, we have a lot of resources, especially as it relates to taxes and loopholes that we can take advantage of. But again, if you don't do the right planning ahead of time proactively, a lot of those same resources can flip on you, right? A lot of those, if you're in the market, you're not planning, you're not, I know Mr. Stark, shared his thoughts on diversification and different things like that, but most people aren't that savvy, right, to be able to track and follow and be that involved in their investments and in their portfolios. And so if you don't take the necessary steps, right, you could definitely be fat down just as quick as you were up. As we talked about and as I shared about my story, like, yeah, I was in real estate back then, and I was already in. I didn't get into entrepreneurship. I left corporate America intentionally, as I'm an Army veteran as well. So after the Army, I went in to work as a contractor for the Department of Defense, and had a great salary there. But I wanted the freedom, and I planned to make that leap into entrepreneurship. I call it the bridge. I built a bridge for myself that while I was building and working in my 9 to 5, I was also on the side building my empire, right, building my dream. And so I didn't get into it by accident. I planned, but as you stated, there's the pandemic caused a lot of people, right? That great, what is it called? The great,
Great migration.
was the one where all the people left their jobs. It was called the reset or great resignation.
Great resignation.
The great resignation, right, has
Great
flooded
resignation, right?
a lot of people, who had great careers, who are now entrepreneurs because of the pandemic, where, as you stated, they were forced into entrepreneurship. And so they basically, at that place where they have to sink or swim. But once you get, I always say, once you get up there and you're getting to a place where you feel like you're floating, it's really wise to start putting some things in place and planning in place, because as we all know who've been in the game for a while, entrepreneurship is like this. It's like the market, it's up and down. So you want to have some plans in place to be able to cover you during those peaks as well as those valleys as well.
No, that makes sense. We got Dan with us as well. And one of the things that you mentioned that I know that Dan will enjoy, and definitely I think that it is very important for folks in general, is it does seem that whether it was in your Army career or whether it was even in this entrepreneurship journey, including coming out of a disastrous situation, that faith played a very important part in your life and your journey. And I know that Dan is definitely a faith-based person as well. So I just really wonder if you just speak to that importance of faith in your own journey.
Is that for
Dr.
me
Jackson.
or Dan?
Yes. Dr.
Oh
Jackson,
yeah.
you.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Everything is faith for me. My company is called Good News, right? And that's birthed off of my faith and my belief system. When I was thinking about starting the company, the spirit basically said, you're passionate about sharing the gospel, of Christ, but you can also take that same passion and share the gospel of financial freedom to people. And so you want to bring that same good news that you bring, to people about your faith. You want to bring that same good news and that passion to people as it relates to their finances. So for me, I tell you, this entrepreneurship is a faith walk. If you're gonna, you can't, I can't imagine like even walking this journey without my faith, because it's a lot of times where that's all you have. That's all you have to depend on is your faith, and believe that things will turn right. And it's definitely a part. I'm also referred to as the financial coach of hope, because again, a lot of people, we're going through life as it relates to our financing, and we don't see no light at the end of the tunnel. And so a lot of times my clients would say, after we would go through their processes, Javon, I feel like I can see the light now. And so that's how I kind of got that term, financial coach of hope, because I like to bring hope and shed light on people to let them know that there is good news in their financial future. So totally faith based all the way.
Sounds good. Dan, I don't know if you have any thoughts. I know you popped in at the end, and then, like I said, I'm going to pivot quickly. If Dr. Jackson wants to stick around, she can, but I definitely want to hear from Sasha about what's going on in Ukraine. It does seem like there was a very horrific act that was done recently, and that was shown on the news, the state news, and all in that space. And a lot of people are reacting to that horrific action and all in that line. And I know that even Zelensky has said some things about that as well. But I'll turn it over to you really quick, Dan, if you had any thoughts for Dr. Jackson. Otherwise, I'm going to pivot back to Sasha.
No, I agree 100% about a journey of faith, and having that hope and that faith as a guiding light in what you do with respect to how you prioritize and how you decide to succeed, but always remembering Christ is the center of things, and always remembering to give back and be willing to help others on the journey, because we're all in this together and we're all brothers and sisters. God is a God of love, and He loves all of us. We're all His children, no matter where we come from or what difficulties that we're working with in our lives. And He's promised that if we take upon us His name, that He will magnify us, and as we magnify Him and enjoy and worship. And so, I agree 100%.
Yeah, no doubt. Sasha, I know we do have an offer that definitely Dr. Jackson is offering about a workshop that they're doing. So I'll put that down across the banner. But if you could share a little bit about what's going on in Ukraine. Like I said, I did hear about that horrific action, that horrific beheading, and all in that space and everything with the soldier. And I was just wondering if you could share some of the other things that are going on. I also understand that, and I know you oftentimes talk about how many Russian soldiers are going out to their death, and it does seem like there are being some rules that are being changed around the military draft that makes it almost impossible for Russians not to be drafted. But if you want to share some of what's going on in that space and some of your thoughts around the current things, I'm sure folks would love to hear your insights.
Well, I would think that yesterday was a pretty good day for Ukrainian armed forces. For example, a day before, there were only 500 Russians killed, but yesterday it was 750, so it's increased 50%. It's quite good. Although, say, a week, 10 days ago, the number was never less than 1,000 a day. So hopefully, you see, Ukraine armed forces reminds a giant meat grinder. So you can absorb just as much meat is coming at you. If Russians are not providing enough meat, so of course there is less numbers. unfortunately. But hopefully they will keep providing enough meat. They're providing now. They preparing a new mobilization, so they will mobilize. The plan is 400,000 people. That's a lot of meat, and that could be very very good for Ukrainian meat grinder. The bad news is that there was a huge information leak from Pentagon, and it's now there's some secret information about upcoming attack of or counterattack of Ukrainians. So now they have to really evaluate what how important that leak was. It was important, as we know, but what are the results and how to deal with that, or so on. So right now, all that is being evaluated. How Ukrainians can still continue preparation to their leaks. But the thing is that Ukrainians now scared to share their secrets and their plans with Western and particularly American allies, because you you cannot be assured that it will not be somehow hacked, or maybe you have some spies in the Pentagon, or what we're dealing with. Nobody really knows, and maybe this is now explains why Ukraine in the first day of war were so successful to resist Russian forces, while Pentagon General Milley, for example, they were saying that Kiev will fall in 72 hours. Okay, that didn't happen. So it appears to me that Milley was not informed fully of defensive plans of Ukrainians, which is a good thing, because if at that time they would have some leaks that would help greatly Russians to have more successful attack. In the meantime, this first phase of war, Ukrainians provided absolutely brilliant tactical and strategic and all weapons mastery on the battlefield. And it seems to me that now they got even much more experience. They got now Western style weapons, and it's just as important, not only weapons, but the experience how to use them, the training. There are now tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers are training in England, Germany, Poland, United States, and they are learning how to use all the latest weaponry. So this is going to be a great hopefully in next few weeks, a great counterattack of Ukrainians on all fronts. And from what I've heard already, mm, it's going to be nothing like we've ever seen before.
Definitely, it looks like it's going to be quite interesting. And like I said, I did hear about the situation with the military draft and all in that way. So it does seem like there are going to be ways that, though they're in Russia, they will not be able to escape. So it does look like they are going to be almost forced into service, and there will be some mandatory service. I thought it was always mandatory there in Russia, but I guess it's going to be even more mandatory. But hasn't it always been a mandatory draft in Russia, or am I mistaken in my thoughts around that?
Well, my younger days, it was a mandatory recruitment to the armed forces. Apparently, I served 2 years in Russian or Soviet at that time, of course, armed forces. But later, when it was all Soviet Union split in 15 republics, so I guess now each republic has its own policies and ways how to their armed forces. So what Russians did now, like before, there is a so-called freedom of movement, if you can call it that. So Russians could always move from Russia to some other countries, whether it could be, never mind, United States or Western countries, because right now it's impossible to get visa to go there, and there is no even flights between Russia and most of these countries. So they have a choice of going to places like Kazakhstan or some Georgia, Armenia, maybe some former Soviet republics, because there are no visa requires, and in fact you can go even by your feet. So now Russians are going to stop that. They're going to make enforcement of all the people of relatively young age who are eligible to serve in the army. They will stop them right on the border without allowing them even to leave country. So they will stop all of them. So if there is a family, a man, his wife, and the children, wife and children can continue their way. The man will be stopped. He will be stopped, interrogated, turned back to his army commander unit, and that's it. So now it's becoming quite difficult, and Ukrainians are now telling all the new people who are arriving to fight for Russia. They're telling them that you have three ways of three um ways of dealing with the situation. Number one, you give up. We will treat you well, and then once the war is over, you will turn to back to your country if you want. If you don't want, you can stay here. The option number two, to be killed, and you wanted to be in Ukraine, you will be in Ukraine forever, in Ukrainian soul. And option number three is um, to go back to Russia, just escape, run, go back to Russia. At least you'll save your life. There are three options. It's your choice. They provide telephone, how to reach the authorities to give yourself up, and that's what's going to happen. You see, it shows the truth. People, most of the people, should I say, they don't want to be killed. There is an instinct of life, of continuation of your life, and regardless how bad is your life, you still want to live. So Ukrainians are providing that option. If you want to leave, that's available to you. You don't want to leave, it's a different story. You will be killed. Period. Full stop.
And it looks like India is getting involved. It says that India is says that Ukraine is seeking medical war recovery assistance. So it's wondering your thoughts around that, because apparently Zelensky has reached out to Prime Minister Modi seeking medical aid in order to help rebuild the infrastructure there in Ukraine. And I know in past shows we talked about India not being involved, but it does look like he is reaching out, that being Zelensky, to the fine folks over there in India. But I was wondering your take on this and whether this is something that will be a beneficial move on both India's part and Ukraine's part.
I wouldn't make a big deal of this because, as we know, India is purchasing Russian oil and gas at reduced or bargain prices, which helps Russia to conduct this war. So, on the other hand, it's a part of Ukrainian diplomacy to be proactive and seek accommodation with anyone that can establish contact. So I would take it. If it's successful, that's great. If not, it's not a big deal either.
You know, one of the other things that we're seeing in the world isn't just Ukraine, but also China. And apparently, China is set to set up a temporary no-fly zone north of Taiwan. And I do know that there are some actions going on between the Philippines and the U.S. outside of China. So I was wondering, is that something that folks are paying attention to and are concerned about? And I'd love to hear maybe even Dr. Jackson's insights, because she did mention that she used to be part of the Defense Department and all in that way. So have you been following, while you've been doing the financial lanes, some of the things that have been going on in the world, and what has your observations been as one that used to be in the Army, and I believe you said you used to work for the Department of Defense?
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, Mark. I haven't been following that closely, but yeah, I haven't. Outside of the financial impact, the impact it's having on the markets and things like that. I just know that we're in definitely a interesting time. There's so much happening all at once, and I think I just been encouraging my intimate circle is like, you know, to not be distracted, like really pay attention, because there's a lot of things that's happening right before our eyes, a lot of changes that are being made, policies that is going to have a great impact on our freedom, as a whole. And I'm really, um, you know, freedom is very important to me. My freedom of choice, speech, everything that the country has stood for. I feel like a lot of that is being changed and being attacked right before our very eyes. And so I'm just encouraging everybody to really be paying attention. Don't get distracted from a lot of the smoke screens, because it's a lot of things happening all around all around the world that is going to have a big impact on the things that we have grown to be accustomed to, the liberties that we've grown to be accustomed to, that is definitely in jeopardy.
No doubt. I'm going to bring in Steve, who's our usual open-end moderator, but I know he's been busy with work and everything. He might have some thoughts as we're getting ready to close out and everything, and I will run across the banner those offers that you were making. I was actually creating those as we were talking and all along those lines, so I'll definitely put those out there in that space and all in that way so that folks can check it out and hopefully get a chance to join and check out these things that you are doing. I think one of them is tomorrow, and all in that way and all in that space. So definitely that is what is scrolling across, and that is actually the words from Dr. Jackson and all in that way. So folks can definitely check that out and definitely have the opportunity to get these offers that she is offering around the tech space and everything. Hey, Steve, I know you've got some close out thoughts and everything. I've been trying to
Well,
figure out.
yeah. Well, I had
Because
I lost I ended up getting it back, but I got hacked and lost all my data on my iPhone. So it took me a few hours to get everything back, and so that was. But anyway, I'm back, and so I lost. I've been working on it since 5 a.m. Got my phone back, but I got to tell you, my closing remarks. I want to thank our guests for being here, and I'll be here tomorrow. But it just goes to show me how connected we are with our devices, and even though it was a very stressful time, it was really nice to have a few hours without my phone. And I felt like I was able to think very clearly. I feel more rested and relaxed. And so you never know. Maybe we have too much devices, and that's why there's so much turbulence in the world today, politically, economically. Maybe
Yeah,
there's another
we're
universe out
we're
there without the
divisive.
phone. Well, they talk about the multiverse. My thought wouldn't it be cool if there was a book written about another universe, parallel universe to ours, that didn't have phone and internet? And how different would their world be than ours? Maybe they're happy and they're solving problems where we got these devices and we're going crazy. That might be a fiction novel, but I didn't really keep up with the news today because I had no device. So I don't really
well,
have
the
any.
only other thing that I saw in the news that folks might be interested in, and I'm still trying to figure out why folks would want to be involved in animal tranquilizers, but I did see that the White House has made a certain drug that is involved in that space as a number one drug that we need to be concerned about. I think it's called Exendol or something along those lines, but it is now got a formal designation as a grave danger. So it is spelled Xylazine. So yeah, Exozyme. And apparently it is used by veterinarians as an animal sedative. So, but apparently it also does some stuff when it's mixed with fentanyl and other things that give a certain kind of high. But it is definitely now been enhanced by law enforcement. It has now been a formal move by the White House and others to designate it as an emerging drug threat, and that is a formal move that requires the administration to create strategies to enhance law enforcement efforts, health interventions, and data collection to combat it. And this is the first time that the White House's Office of the National Drug Control Policy has ever identified a substance for that designation, a mark of the gravity of the danger that it considers to be posed by said drug. And it was used, like I said, it was first approved for veterinary processes, primarily in cattle and horses 50 years ago. But apparently, if you mix it with certain other drugs, it's supposed to give you all kinds of crazy highs and all in that space. So I guess that's why it is being used by some of our young folks and all in that space. But it also can create migraines, double visions, and body rattling anxiety. So like I said, why you would want that drug is beyond me. But then again, it's beyond me why you would want a lot of drugs and everything. But definitely that's just my thoughts on the
Well,
matter. But definitely I don't know what folks' other thoughts are.
it's a
Stupid
pleasure to
is
be
what
here. I'll
stupid
be back
does.
tomorrow. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Jackson. I'm so sorry I missed your analysis, but hopefully you'll be back. And anyway, it's good to see all of you. Be back tomorrow to kick off the show.
Sounds good. We're going to wrap everything up. And like you said, was glad to have Dr. Jackson on. She did share some of her financial wisdom and all of that. And hopefully she'll be back on in the not too distant future. And who knows, we might even sneak her over to one of Sasha's shows one of these days as well, if he's interested in that space, because I do know that is more his lane than my lane. But definitely, I was glad to have you on, and hopefully we'll see you back in the not too distant future. If there's any closing last second thoughts that you have, Dr. Jackson, I'll turn it over to you. Otherwise, I want to hit the end button.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark and Dr. Steve. I appreciate you both for the invitation, and just want to remind your audience, I wanted to share just some gifts with them, a copy of my book called You Be the Bank, Finance Yourself to Wealth, where we talk a lot about some of the things, the strategies we talked about in terms of turning the tables on your creditors, right? So you can allow the power of compound interest to work in your favor versus theirs. And then I'm also hosting a workshop tomorrow, April the 13th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, on how to protect yourself from a potential tax storm. So if anybody's interested in that, I've dropped the links there. Please register. Let's stay connected. And I look forward to sharing more with your audience in the future.
Sounds good. So we're going to get on out of here, and we'll catch you on the next time. But we've got other shows, including the investment show, coming up in about less than 2 hours. So at 1 o'clock, we'll be hearing about investment tips from Sasha. And is Dr. McHale coming this time around, or is it some other folks that you've got this time around? Sasha, who do you have on the show?
I will have Dr. Milan Somborok. He's a proponent of S&P 500 as a strategist that I've discussed with you earlier.
I look forward to coming on your show soon, Sasha. So maybe next week sometime.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, guys. I got to run. Appreciate
You're
it.
all welcome.
Yeah.
You're all welcome to the show. Also, I will have Jim Ida from Ida Foundation. And today I will release one, it's kind of information that I've just discovered recently. It's one company involved in rare metals, including lithium, which is very popular these days. And what's remarkable about this company is located in Latin America, in one of the stable countries there, which is Chile. And the most amazing thing is that it pays 10.5% annual dividends. So this is a kind of a very rare combination, safe country, lithium development, and stable, sizable dividend. It's 10.5%. It's not a joke. So I will talk more about on the show. You're all welcome to attend. Thank you so much, everybody.
Sounds good. We'll catch you later.
Bye-bye.